related to the certainty quality is a sense of that all is well. That
Yes.
it's cool.
It's cool.
We can't screw this up. You know?
Right.
So people, and then you sort of get bliss states that
Right.
can happen, and it's sort of in the mix of that. But the fundamental quality is that we're the oneness, and always have been, can't die, that kind of deal. Bodies can come and go, but what we are is fine.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
But now, let's
okay.
talk about
Yeah,
that.
no, that's
Let's talk about that one,
important.
because again, we can bring this kind of Western science thing to these experiences. Okay, so if human consciousness is such that there's an aspect of our experience that is boundless by time, place, and person, right? That time boundlessness thing, when ontologized, would turn into without end, without beginning.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Right.
That would turn into immortal. That would turn into eternal.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so then it's crystallized and in time and verbalized. And
Yeah. So, and as an extension of that, you can't die, and if that's in some deep sense who you are, that's going to continue forever. And that's something science is not going to say anything about.
Well, fair enough. And I'm not sure I could make a claim. I mean, I have no idea what's going to happen when this body dies. But I know the feel of selfless context that it's cool.
And so that might be one way to sort of, in these two aspects, to sort of say let's the part that where in a Venn diagram it overlaps is the part where, there is genuinely experiences of timelessness without place, without person.
Without person, yes.
Oneness that is of a sort where the categories disappear. And it's related. Part of what's exciting to me about what we're trying to do in the CBS universe is we're trying to get to these basic cognitive processes that we think are involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
That would bring something new to the table
It would.
if that's actually,
Yes.
if you could actually do that. And the additional step of then, if you don't ontologize it, if you simply say, let's just go with that experience, then we're in an area of the Venn diagram where we really can work together.
Yes. Yep.
And when I say we, I mean the mystical traditions and the scientific traditions.
Yes, exactly. Because they've got some ways of going towards that you haven't really talked about yet. And I really believe that out of this work, self as perspective taking, how we get there, all of that will, as you've sort of said as one of your goals, to develop more ways to get to that place.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I see that coming, and some of that's popping out.
I do too. I think it's important.
Yeah. Okay. Like to get a little bit about your experiences and what it was like. I mean, last time we spoke about a couple of near-death things, and
sure.
And so discount the data point of that experience rather than how cool it makes you, or whatever.
Yeah.
Do you feel inclined to speak to that a bit, or should we leave that for some other time?
I think we could speak about it in this way.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything very. This is part of this recognition piece. In a way, this is not special.
Yes.
I think, I would like to think, and I actually do think, that almost everybody, that's that quote there, has touched this space in their life.
Yeah.
They know about this.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, at some level, everybody does. And there's a level at which they don't.
And it is interesting, and you put me onto it, and your teacher put me onto it, and in workshops I'm talking about near-death experiences more, because most people have had that experience.
Yeah.
And it's just universal, that at the point at which you're falling and you're not sure if you're going to survive, or you're sliding towards that semi and you're not sure you're going to survive, time slows down, there's a peaceful place that shows up, and you show up.
Yes.
of the, or if you want to say it that
as,
way.
as self as
This
content,
way,
as
yeah,
a-
exactly.
it's
This
as-
kind of
as the
rips
big
out
self,
of
yeah.
consciousness shows up. This aspect
Yeah.
shows up. And that's, now why would that be? You know, that's a very interesting, that why would that be? Why then? You know, the mystical folks would have to have an answer to that. The science folks should have an answer to that too.
Well,
You know,
and some of them would
it's
say,
something.
well, it's just you know, it's something we can explain away. I mean,
Well, but
something-
the part you wouldn't, you have to at least explain away, but you have to at least explain. You know, like the explain part of why then.
yes,
Why then? Why not when you have a shower, or when you know, and there's something about, there's a place beyond which categories are even meaningful. There's something so expansive, or something
Yes.
like death,
yes,
that your mind just implodes or something. And what is still there is what is always there, which is consciousness is there in this aspect.
yes,
And if it wasn't, you wouldn't be able to remember your memories, you wouldn't be able to tell your stories. And it's an aspect of human experience that, and there I am talking RFT-wise, that the I hear nowness fully integrated with the you there then, I mean the whole kind of, it is the ground of consciousness. Perspective taking is the ground of consciousness that allow us even to use categories in a way
yes,
that tell stories, that create metaphors, that imagine futures that have not been, that allow us to communicate as speakers and listeners and make use of this tool that we came up with, these arbitrary relations, being able to, you know, relate things simply because we declare them to be so that way. And coming back to my point,
yeah, and
you know, I did tell the story before of near-death experiences, and the pivotal story, which I've now told twice in a workshop, because I think you actually pushed me to talk about this by just asking the question. And I'm finding myself writing about it in a book I'm working on right now, of stepping out of panic disorder. I've told the story very badly in the 2 workshops I've done, because I find it so intense and also beyond ability to language about. I did it once in a workshop recently. I told this story and I forgot to tell them that it was a panic attack, because it started with a heart attack. I thought I was dying.
wow,
I thought I was having a heart attack, right, inside a panic attack.
yes,
And then having this kind of sense of stepping out and watching my hand reaching for the phone to call the emergency room, and then going into kind of like an imaginary thing where I imagined what would happen when I went there, and ultimately the smart aleck physician telling me, you know, with a sneer, basically, this is not a heart attack, this is a panic attack. And then kind of howling my way, literally out loud, howling my way into the moment and kind of landing, and making a promise to myself that no matter what happens, I was not going to turn from my experience. And if I did, I promise, even that, I was not going to turn from that. And that puts me on the path that leads me into the act world and all of the things that we've created. I mean, there's a pivot point in my personal life between this transcendent sense of self and the capacity to choose to be present. And that puts you in a different path. That is, I think if you look at the folks who've been moved by the act work, but not just the act work, the mindfulness work, but not just that, the psychotherapy wing that's connected to this mystical side, you'll see over and over again this thing of presence, choice, consciousness, and values coming together kind of as a whole. And that's true to my personal experience. That's the package in which it showed up. It's kind of an inherent extension of, and just a couple of years later, I'm writing that self as context, and it makes sense, the spirituality piece. I'm not telling a personal story, but the reason I'm writing that is I'm writing about, scientists need to deal with the transcendent in a way that's not dismissive.
Yeah.
And you can do that. You don't have to become a
that's
dualist to
right,
do that.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, that's the doorway that you, I think, just brilliantly opened there. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just elegant. how that works. But I think we've got further exploration to do.
Yeah. Now in the CDS world, and if you get in this workshop, the exploration, the dialectic is how to dance on that knife's edge, maintaining as part of scientific tradition, not because you'd have to maintain that commitment, but as a part of scientific tradition.
We choose
that tradition.
Somebody has chosen. Something has chosen here to be doing that.
Yeah. And if we're doing that, then that includes this kind of way of.
Yes.
And then there's this other aspect of. I may have presented that in a way that creates a distinction, but there's this aspect of human complexity that requires respectful and non-minimizing investigation.
Not sneering like that fellow who's...
no sneering. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I do get a little bit frustrated with simply being there as validators and anointers. Like the monks and magnets work. I think it's fine to put monks and magnets. But what you're going to end up with, this is a little bit of a sneer, doing fMRI, I would work with meditators and things like that.
Is that Andrew Newberg's stuff?
Or Richie Davison and so forth,
Okay.
who I respect it, I think it's worthwhile. But then simply doing that and saying, oh, by the way, these thousands of years old traditions can be shown with Western science methods really to be changing how the brain operates.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. And then I want to know, and what did you add by that, other than the scientific gatekeeping function has been satisfied?
Yes.
Well, maybe you can add things that way. But in the CBS tradition, we're trying to add them in this other way of trying to see what are the behavioral processes and the cognitive processes, and can we know that so deeply that we can kind of pull at the joints and add new methods that will actually open doors for people.
For this to open, because
Yeah.
I mean, I think and this is another sort of paradox that yes, teachers everybody's awake. I mean, the Buddha, another example of the sort of I thou thing. That's at the moment of enlightenment said, I and all beings have simultaneously awakened. So there's this level at which we see that it's everybody's awake somewhere in there,
Right.
and there's so much suffering related to not knowing that.
Right.
So there's a level at which being wants to share itself with, and there's a sense that, I mean, it seems to me, and I don't know if this is an ontological thing, but it seems to me that there's a flow towards everybody coming, self as context in everyone coming to see itself that way.
Well, now this is there's another empirical fact that compassion sharing community flows out of this mystical experience.
Yes. Yeah. The I that is we.
Mishandled wars flow out of this too, so be careful
exactly.
about that.
And we've got to look at how that happens, I think.
Yeah, exactly. We really do want to. And I think the CBS folks are well suited to do it.
Exactly, yeah.
I did a talk at the London WorldCon. It's like, I think you've probably seen, but where I was trying to walk out. If selfless context really has that kind of social extension, why that's so, and it comes to something like this: if I hear nowness is inherently one that is connected to others. If you're going to do acceptance work and sort of open up to what's present, that necessarily means you have to do the compassion matters.
Yes.
Because your pain pains me.
Yes.
If there's suffering anywhere in the world, it's here in some way.
Yeah.
And so there's no way to cordon that off and to say, well, that doesn't matter, but this does.
Right.
Without doing violence to the very processes that are the ground you stood on when you opened up to being with yourself in a way that is whole and not conditional. It means you have to be with And I now warn people about that, in workshops. I say if the bell rings, if you're tuning fork, that you hear the note, this is worth pursuing, but fair warning, this is not a happy smiley face journey.
No.
This is a journey where when you go to the grocery store, you might want to cry because you see suffering around you.
Yeah, and then you've got to do your best to do something about that.
Exactly. And there's something kind of holy about the work, or empowering about the work,
Yeah.
or dignified about the work, or human about the work. It seems as though this is worth attention.
Yeah.
So then people need to choose. You want to be on that path or not.
Right. Yeah. Do they want to be part of a community that's modeling this? I mean, I think that's what's amazing in the way that you're doing this, is that this community is a model.
Well, we've as you know, we've consciously built ACBS and the things that we do there on these processes. Now, could we screw it up? Boy, I see 100 ways we can screw it up.
Of course.
We've probably already screwed it up.
Sure.
But so far, we've done pretty good job of avoiding the obvious pitfalls.
We're going to make some new mistakes.
Yeah,
not
we'll
the
make
same ones we see.
By really trying to undermine needless hierarchy, for example.
Yes.
Letting multiple voices come in, and inviting in critics. And thank you for being here. There's a space in here that I think is important for the work. Let me just say it this way. If we're going to bring psychology into this space, and to do it without minimizing and without sneering, we can't do that without we can't do that and subtract this issue out of what we're looking at. Like, for example, the acceptance work or the mindfulness work, without this part of it, can very easily turn into self-soothing, acceptance junkies, workshop junkies, meditation junkies, like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you put this work there, and you allow it to be extended, like the extension into compassion, values, for example, which I think is inherently part of it. Then you've done something that is truer to the work. And one thing I do think is kind of neat, the ACT stuff starts there. It starts there personally. It starts there in writing.
Yeah.
And one thing I would say, just to sort of have it on, is that if the CDS tradition, at least, if it's going to try to deal with mystical experience, for example, it dare not do that without really taking seriously consciousness, the nature of consciousness, and the nature and the kind of consciousness inside mystical experience. If we just do values, we can turn into another motivational program that will help people be better salesmen or something. I mean, that's already happened. But if we just do the acceptance work, that you can turn into the psychological equivalent of benzodiazepines.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The part the leverage point, the pivot point that makes this not that is this stuff that we're talking about, which is consciousness is connected to.
And it moves and acts. I mean,
the movement and action inside that
yeah.
space, or with that.
Yeah.
I hesitated on it moves and acts.
Well, yeah, and so this is an ongoing conversation, but my experience of self as context is that there's nobody doing it. It's an extension of there not being a Michael. Right. All right, so what is it that's doing it? Well, it's happening, and let's call it an it. I mean, you were pointing out the problematicness of it. I mean, anything that we call it is a problem.
Right.
But suchness, I mean, it's simply
movement.
doing what it's doing. There is movement. And it's very intelligent, apparently. I mean, and caring. I mean, it is what. I mean, we can do acceptance from a point of view of that I'm somebody being accepting, but we can dive into the place where whatever this is, this mystery, is inherently accepting and compassionate and moves to liberate itself.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you're part of the community and you're doing that workshop and you're trying to bring this in.
Yeah.
And and in the dialogue, things will happen.
Yeah.
That I think will be worthwhile. And the part that you're really kind of hanging on to, that's really is exactly. It's a foundation. I kind of like that, in the hexagon thing, it's at the bottom.
Yeah, nice.
It's the pivot.
Yes.
It's like
I hadn't thought about that, but yes, beautiful. Yeah.
It's the place from which it's possible. Like if you're bound up over here on the left with struggle, entanglement, and avoidance, it's the pivot that allows you to move through into the present moment towards what you care about.
Awesome.
Just like a windshield wiper or something. And there's a little bit of moment of clarity. Life will probably throw more stuff up on the screen.
Inevitably.
And you'll have to do it again. But that pivot point,
yeah.
If you start from consciousness, from wholeness, it'll be clear.
Well, yeah, and it seems to be the job of this particular mind stream is to try to stand for that element in this.
And this is maybe it's not a good way to end, but this thing of it's inherent, it moves and so on. Just like a windshield wiper, if it was stuck, it moves. Like when I've done work out of this place with clients where they really kind of get this kind of acceptance place, for example, they naturally move towards values. It just happens. It just happens because once they're here, they want to do stuff.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
It just happens.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, so anyway, maybe it's just we're looking at.
Well, it's like the last word. I noticed it was moving. It's not just.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it could be anything. It could be oneness. It could be moves back and forth. It could be watch out.
Yeah.
It could be all of that all at the same time.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
So there's our windshield wiper. Okay.
This is great.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Deep pleasure.
This is great.
Cool. Yeah. Ooh.